and institutions. It is Wednesday, February 19th. We're shifting gears again. We don't have anything in our capital budget for this, but this is Recovery Day. Folks, it's for our recovery network, the network, as well as our local turning points. And so they wanted some time before the committee. I know, Tracy, we've spoken to you a couple times, number of times for the recovery coaching that occurs within correctional facilities, but also how important Turning Point is. Don't turn all the way down. James going to get really close.
If we're reading Mary's mind, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't say anything. That's what I said. It's freezing in here. So anyway, so they wanted to come before the committee and just talk to us about Turning Point as a whole and the network. Tracy, I'm going to turn it over to you. Welcome. There's nothing in the capital bill for this, so it's just a time to get updated on how the recovery network is. Okay, welcome.
Thank you. So I wrote my testimony today, which a lot of times I wing it, so I'm going to read. My name is Tracy Hauk. I'm the executive director of the Turning Point Center in Rutland, Vermont. I'm also a person in long-term recovery and will be celebrating 12 years this May. I would like to thank Chairperson Emmons and this committee for the opportunity to testify today in support of Recovery Partners of Vermont's ask for an increase of $1.6 million to our base funding for Vermont's local recovery organizations in the fiscal year 26 budget. We do have slides. We're not presenting them today, but I believe you all have them that refer to this.
And just to clarify for the committee, 1.6 that's being requested is in the general fund in appropriations committee. It's not us.
Yep.
And I'm going to ask this little question. Was it included in the governor's proposed FY26 budget? It was not.
Nothing was.
Yeah, sure. Nothing at all.
There are things that are in there related to recovery, but not the acts that were.
Yes. Okay.
It's not good.
So recovery organizations are local, self-directed, inclusive organizations that offer peer-led services and support to help people realize the power they have to break free from their addiction. We meet individuals where they are at without judgment or stigma to help them develop a recovery plan. I've been the director of the Turning Point Center where my recovery journey began, and I got my recovery through the Turning Point Center for the past 10 years. Over this time, recovery centers have made tremendous growth, yet the demand for recovery coaching continues to rise with the opioid public health emergency and alcohol use disorder. Currently, recovery coaches provide services from our local recovery centers, in emergency rooms, with outpatient treatment programs such as IOP, with law enforcement, in public schools and colleges as part of multidisciplinary outreach teams, and most recently in correctional facilities and at probation and parole. In addition to one-to-one coaching, coaches also facilitate recovery support groups in the recovery centers and off-site at various community organizations. They provide Narcan training to community partners, individuals, and have also become part of the training curriculum for the Vermont State Police Academy and for the Vermont Corrections Academy. We've had recent requests for recovery coaches to provide services offsite at local MAT providers so they can be available to individuals who continue to struggle with recovery, and also to collaborate with our local birthing center. That's specific to us in Rutland. I can't speak for other centers, but you know, that expands our outreach. I mean, we're going to be spending 2 hours a week to start in Bradford Psychiatric Associates, which is now a nonprofit. It's going to be called Meadowbrook Health Services, offer MAT, mental health support, primary care, plus AccuDetox, plus all kinds of other modalities. They're really growing, but they would like coaches to be present when they hold their groups, which is like 10 groups a week, and also to be available with people that are having trouble passing their drug tests. So, sorry, I'm just gonna find my spot. The state funding So what this is going to, while these developments are wonderful, the reality is this work will require more recovery coaches than we currently have. The state funding we received in fiscal year 2025 to expand our recovery coaching services around the state is working. We have scaled this resource significantly in the past year. Yet with the current demand, we will need many more skilled recovery coaches than we have. Many of our recovery coaches are stretched thin, working in multiple program areas at once, which makes it difficult to fully expand and develop each program to its fullest potential. Most of the recovery centers are poised and ready to expand services, but lack the revenue to do this without state support. Our recovery organizations want to have an established presence at every doorway an individual struggling with SUD may go through. An increase in base funding for recovery organizations would provide us the opportunity to extend hours of operation, match external funding sources to further increase services, and offer competitive wages to attract and retain a skilled workforce. More trained recovery coaches means a better concentration on specific programs, effectively making them more impactful. This is how we plan to spend a portion of our 1.6 million request. This work has a direct impact on people's lives. Thank you again for this opportunity, and we would greatly appreciate your support for this funding. And I think there's one other statement I want to make. When I talk about, most of the recovery centers, their staffing is all recovery coaches. So when you talk about doing these groups and providing outreach and being where the people are, it takes time, it takes hours. But I also want you to understand fully what the recovery coaching relationship looks like. When someone comes in seeking a recovery coach, they get matched up with a coach. Generally, what that is you set up a meeting with them. You meet once a week, generally, for an hour. It could be more often than that if they're struggling. But when you think about all those hours of actually providing recovery coaching and more people providing services, and then all the other things that we do, I have a staff of about 13 people. I have them running all over the place, but we need to be able to train and develop more coaches out of the people that we're serving and build that workforce and give them opportunities to do the work. And that takes time, but they are the perfect candidates to mold and get to this. But when we don't have any positions open because all our funding is tapped into what we got, makes it hard to have them move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Connor?
How's recruiting staff going these days? It feels like every sector, it's pretty tough to find qualified people. Do you have a lot of vacancies generally?
It is. I mean, I can only speak for my center. I don't post for positions at my center. My center staff has all come from people that have received services from us and have kind of wanted to become recovery coaches. So it's people that have started out as receiving recovery coaching, volunteering, maybe getting like a front desk reception job that is a non-coaching job part-time. And then when we feel they're ready, they're the right fit, they can support all paths of recovery. Then we have them go to the Recovery Coach Academy, and then depending on the funding, then that's what we can give them for a job.
Fantastic.
Brian?
Well, you just said all paths of recovery. Can you say more about that? What does that mean?
We support people that are practicing harm reduction, that they're on maintenance, if they want to give up using heroin and crack, but they may still drink, they may still smoke marijuana. We don't ever shun them away, right? I look at it as the process of, as they gain more back, they're going to be more mindful. They have to have a recovery program, whether they practice abstinence or on MAT or a harm reduction model. So we just support them anyway, and the idea is for them to change the behaviors, because ultimately that's what people want people that have addictions to do, is to change those behaviors.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Questions? Thoughts? Sean?
What's the percentage of people who are dealing with alcohol use disorder?
Very high percentage. Very high. I don't have stats readily to give you, but I know, like with the emergency room department, I think the majority of people they see in there are people that struggle with alcohol use. And that is one of the kind of overlooked things now that the opioid crisis has gone on, but it is still huge.
Same. 2/3 in Bennington.
Consistently from any channel.
from so Turning Point in Bennington, it's 66% on average,
Wow.
all the time. And that's people we see in the emergency room, that's referrals from the police, that's refusals of transport for EMS, that's probation and parole, that's DCF involvement. It's every sector alcohol dominates.
And it's also, it's not, if somebody has an alcohol use disorder and somebody has an opioid use, it's not, you don't have one or the other. There's many people that have both.
I was wondering how much of that is intertwined.
Yeah, there's a lot of it that's intertwined. And when you think about when you're, when you have an addiction, your reliance on that substance is to wipe away the stuff that's going on in your head and the emotions that you have to deal with. So if you're going to give up using crack, say, but you still drink, the risk of death is not so imminent with drinking, right? And you still have all those negative thoughts and the stigma and the shame and all of that goes through your head. So it's very easy to turn to another substance for substitution.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So are you finding it difficult when it's, I don't want to use the term co-occurring because that brings in another issue of mental health, but are you finding it difficult to really help folks when they're both mixing alcohol as well as opioid use?
Yeah, I think because of all the tainted substances in the opioid, I mean, we've seen since, COVID, I mean, we've seen people that we've known that struggle with substance use that would come to our center periodically. We've seen tremendous mental health changes that have happened because of using crack and all the tainted substances that are in it, which make it to a point where they're not even like the same person that you've seen before. They have a lot of paranoia. There's just a lot of different behaviors that, we have to take into account the safety of our organization. And if they're in there, it's tough. And it's difficult to get them the services they need to deal with the mental health issues.
So in dealing with the alcohol piece and then the opioid piece, is it across all age groups or are you seeing more of the alcohol in the older age groups? And then in your younger age group, is it more of a combination of alcohol and opioid? Or does it not matter?
I don't think it matters. I think it's across all. I think it's changing all the time, right? I think it's affecting, I worry about youth, I really want to get into the schools, but we hit roadblocks with getting into our schools and.
From the schools?
Hmm?
From the schools?
Yeah. They don't want to really, I don't know, it's sort of like they think you're introducing ideas to students when, when I did a resource fair at Rutland Middle School, this was like 2 years ago. And I was talking to the principal there and she had asked us to have a booth there when they were having parent teacher conferences. And when I was talking to her, she said she knew for a fact there were about 5 students in school that year that had lost a parent to an overdose that year. So what hits me is what has that child seen? What have they what behaviors have been modeled for them? The stigma and the shame and, the likelihood of them going down the same path is very high. And I think I worry about kids going to parties with all the tainted substances. Somebody's going to bring something, the secondary trauma is going to happen if there's an overdose and they're not supposed to be at the party. And why not teach them about Narcan and just have open conversations about this? Normalize it.
So Brian, did you have your hand up? No?
I did not.
I did a long time ago.
Oh, I didn't see it.
Right.
Okay, James and then Connor.
I was just gonna, just to help understand how the program, how do the way you do things similar and dissimilar from like, say, AA?
Because we are not just focused on 12-step. We're not a sponsor to help somebody work through the 12 steps. We are there to really guide them to the resources and what will speak to them and what they can relate to and do. So whether it's just recovery coaching, and I mean, I've got some people I've been recovery coaching now for like 2 or 3 years, so the relationship can go on, but the idea is to help them figure out what their supports are going to be outside of that recovery coaching so that they can, it's kind of like a bird growing up and ready to fly out of the nest. What do they develop for supports around them? And I believe people have to have multiple areas of support to turn to peer support is the most easiest because you don't get any backlash really from, if it's clinical and you're complaining about your therapist, then there might, or you're causing disruption in groups, you get booted out. It's not the way it is at centers, right? We really try to help them focus on how to deal with those things as they're happening in the best way possible.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was just gonna add that our approach to recovery is all paths to recovery. So no two people are gonna have the same path to recovery. So some might embrace the AA or Narcotics Anonymous. Others might find yoga and meditation and some other alternative health approaches as their way. We're open to all that. Our job is to make sure they have a plan and a plan of their recovery. What is the things that they need to do that are really going to help them, deepen their recovery?
Yeah, Tracy, do you mind talking about how you would work with folks who might be experiencing homelessness? It seems like, you need consistency in a program like that, but you're at a really uncertain period of your life if you're unhoused, right?
We deal with a lot of people that are homeless. We have a lot of people that come into our center. In our center, we have morphed around just trying to be able to help them make connections to providers that can help them with housing. And also just explaining the reality, there isn't much for housing in Rutland, right? And if they go to rehab, we talk to them in depth about, well, when you get done rehab, talk about going to Grace House or V4 House or Jenna's Promise or McGee House, which are transitional housing, to give them a little more time to work on a more permanent solution going forward. We're always promoting those as steps for them to go. But we provide food, we get food down at the center to be able to hand out to people. We work with the outreach care team that has Rutland Mental Health and the law enforcement and the free clinic. And one of our coaches, they go out to all the homeless communities in Rutland and just try to meet people where they're at and see what they need in that moment. So
That's
it could be,
fantastic. So you'd be like up at the Cortina Inn there and.
actually, the Cortina's closed.
Oh, that's
So
right.
nobody's there.
Yeah.
But it's going to the homeless encampments where they know people are, or
Okay.
where they're going. There's a Methodist church that is called the Comfort Zone that offers breakfast and lunch to homeless people. So there's a large population of homeless people there. So they go there on a regular basis, just to mental health services, whatever they need. If they need medical care and that's what is the priority, then that's what you provide to them in the hope that you build that trust and then they will come for more support.
Excellent. Thanks.
You're welcome.
John?
Tracy, is there any, I'm just asking, is there any spiritual element to what you're doing with these people or not really?
Yeah, there is, we talk about that, spirituality, you kind of have to have some spirituality, because most people that struggle with addiction, it's very self-serving and everything is about them. So they're the higher power. So helping them when they've decided to quit drugs or alcohol, to be able to get to that point takes time afterwards. It's not something that comes to them the minute they put down drugs and alcohol. They have to learn it, they have to recognize it, and they have to go through experiences where it's, like I'm recognizing this about myself and want to change it. So it's a long ongoing process.
Thanks.
So Tracy, I know that you've brought some folks with you and then we have someone on Zoom with
We have
us.
Robert Blaze on Zoom.
Okay,
Can you guys hear
so-
me okay?
Yes. Can you
Okay.
Robert, can you just identify yourself for the record, please?
Robert Blaze, 7 years of sobriety. I celebrated in November from drugs, and I just celebrated a year from alcohol on the 29th of January.
All right, there you go. So talk about the substitution. There you go.
Exactly. I was over here and you talk about that, and what happened with me was I met Tanya in Turning Point in 2016 while incarcerated due to drugs. And it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me in my life. They helped me stay sober and gave me an avenue of a place to go when I got out for people that actually cared about people like me. And I was able to meet with a recovery coach once a week while I was incarcerated in Rutland, Marble Valley, John Howard. He's no longer with the center, but I still keep in contact with him. And then what happened, I got complacent in life, like most addicts or most people do, and I fell off and started drinking heavy again over a year ago, and it got me back in trouble. But when I got out, I immediately came to the service center, and I immediately got myself a recovery coach again, Mike Daly, who works here. Knowing how important it was to have a recovery coach. And I'm just teaching myself new ways of trying not to get complacent this time. Some of the things that John used to do with me is we would go to breakfast or we'd go out and have a coffee. They weren't always in the office, we'd do activities together. He was the one that taught me about higher power. My higher power is hikes, being in the woods. That's talking about spirituality. That's where I go for my higher power when I'm having a bad day. Is I try to go for a hike and to get out of my head. I can't say enough good things about recovery coaching. And like Tracy said, there isn't enough of them. I was actually asked today. I was by the judge because I'm in federal treatment court for this last incident. And the lady that works at BPA here in Rutland and the judge both had mentioned that maybe I should think of a career change myself because I've been asked in the past to be a recovery coach. I've done construction my whole life, and it has been something that I've thought about, especially a lot lately, because I get a lot out of trying to tell people my story about how much recovery has helped my life and keep me on the right path. And telling my story and talking to others helps me stay sober. And I think you'll get that same answer across the board from a lot of recovery coaches. It's not just about coming in and sitting in a chair for an hour and just talking. A lot of recovery coaches do things differently, finding activities and being productive. And that's just it. If you can find yourself a productive way to do things, it helps keep you out of your mind and falling back into old habits. And I've had struggled with alcohol my whole life at an early age of 10 years old. And even before, when I was getting sober off from drugs, I was still struggling with alcohol, but I'm doing it now. So that's all that matters at the end of the day. And I didn't ignore Turning Point or how I got there to begin with. I knew this was a place I had to go as soon as I was released in November. And this is the first place I came. I was out 2 days and came right here.
Wow. Well, good for you, Robert. I mean, that's
Maybe a future employee. I don't know.
never know.
You
But
never know.
thank you. Other questions for Robert from the committee for that?
No, I just think that was a great job interview. So, hey, find yourself a job.
I just want days off to go golfing. That's it.
There you go.
We can be pretty flexible, Robert.
Well, summer and fall, right?
All right.
Is there anyone else that you brought in that would like to testify?
Dylan over here, he's from Bennington, right?
I'm from Bennington. How is everybody?
Good. So Dylan, if you could introduce to
Hi.
the record.
I will do that. And this is my first time ever doing something like this. I wrote something and kind of like his, it's about my story and how I ended up here. So good afternoon. My name is Dylan Johnson. I'm a recovery coach for Turning Point Center of Bennington. I am also in long-term recovery. I am about 6 years sober from heroin and cocaine. I'm here today as well to request an additional 1.6 million in our base funding. And I would just like to start with a little summary of my own story. My journey began in Baltimore, Maryland, where I was born and raised. I had a wonderful childhood. I have a loving and supportive family to this day. And in spite of that, I still ended up using cocaine in my late teens and heroin at age 21. Within a year of that, I was at this point living in California. I lost everything. So by 22, my job, friends, they had an intervention with my father came out there. I was losing family. And I was living in California and my father flew out and they had an intervention and he took me back to Baltimore to live with him and try to get sober. However, even with my father supporting me, and I will say Baltimore is probably the worst place to get sober in the United States, I quickly relapsed again and I wound up homeless in West Baltimore, where I was for several years. I ended up getting multiple petty possession charges and a couple felony intent to distribute. This led to me being put on probation in Baltimore in the summer of 2019, and I once again moved back in with my father. He never wavered in trying to help me. And so I got put on probation, and in probation in Baltimore, it's a lot different than probation up here. I was never offered any recovery programming such as one-on-one recovery coaching. I don't even know if that exists in Maryland. My PO would, and this is not to denigrate her, she would forget my name and background every week and would have to recheck it when I come in. I mean, she was just overworked and they were understaffed. I just wanted to show, how important recovery programming in probation and parole is. So within a few weeks of being placed on probation, probably due in part to the lack of support, I got it in my mind to relapse. And so when my dad left for work one day, I used and immediately overdosed. If my father hadn't forgotten his wallet, I would not be here today speaking to you. He came back, he found me, he called 911, and 30 minutes later, I was being Narcaned multiple times in an ambulance on the way to the hospital. After a few hours, they said I was good to go and discharged me. No recovery coaching in the hospital in Baltimore either. A few weeks after this, my father had a heart attack in his sleep, and I found him unresponsive the next day. He was my best friend. He had never wavered in his support of my recovery, and losing him was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. I had made up my mind I was going to get sober no matter what. My mother came down to Maryland, begged the PO to transfer me to Vermont where she lived, and they finally acquiesced. Once I touched base in Vermont, I quickly realized that there were different ways of doing things. My PO, Michael Doheny, he implored me to get connected with Turning Point and with Hci-2025. I went and introduced myself and was immediately connected with Bennington's recovery community. I started going to therapy, recovery groups, and utilized Turning Point's connections and programming. Soon after, I went to community college. I got a degree in behavioral science and applied to intern at Turning Point for a work experience class. I was hired by this wonderful woman quickly after. And a few years later, after successfully completing my probation without incident, I even began working in probation. Today, I'm a recovery coach in our center and in the emergency department. I'm in charge of our data collection. I used to manage our outreach team. I lead our probation and parole group every week, as well as one-on-one coaching with individuals in corrections. These programs are the cutting edge of recovery work in Vermont. It is a great honor and privilege to be allowed in these spaces and work with guys in corrections. Often these individuals are some of the least served and most disenfranchised in our communities. Having the background that I do, I'm able to connect with them across our shared experiences for an alternative perspective and way of living. It has given my own life meaning and fulfillment. I've learned about the need for recovery centers, communities, programs, after living in places like Baltimore with little to no support. Hopefully, my story has demonstrated how important the work these centers do, often at very little cost to the taxpayer, and it cannot be understated how crucial connection to the recovery community is. That's why I'm here. Thank you.
So I do have a couple of questions.
I know, let's try. I was told to speak slowly, but I heard somebody say time was running out, so I kind of had
That's
to
fine.
blaze
That's
through
fine.
that.
So Hci-2025?
Yeah.
What's Hci-2025?
Hci-2025 is an MAT program, so medication assisted treatment. I tried many times in Baltimore to get sober without MAT and would fail. It was really helpful to me to get on a Suboxone program. I got into it by telling them I don't want to be on this forever. So let's have like a taper plan and all of that, which I think every person's different.
Mhm.
I know plenty of people who being on Suboxone for the rest of their life is the lesser evil. And so we support that too, but it's a MAT program.
And it's out in the community.
Yeah.
At your hub and spoke.
And we work with them now, and when they do intakes, they page us and we come over and sit with them there and do intakes with them as well.
So when you go into the facilities and you're working with folks, how many of the folks you're working with are in the MAT? I'm still going to call it the MAT. It's now MOUD.
Oh, I apologize.
We still call it.
I still go back to
Yeah.
MAT because it's easy. Well, How many of the folks, when you're working within a correctional facility, are on the MAT program within?
Quite a few. We lead a group right now in probation with 8 guys. And I would say I know 4 of them are on, 3 of them are on Suboxone. 1 goes to North Adams for the methadone clinic every day.
So these are they on furlough? They've re-entered the
Some
community?
probation, some parole, but
Okay.
yeah, I think 1 guy's on furlough.
So did they talk about how it was when they were incarcerated, how the MAT program was operating, and then when they transitioned back into the community? Is it seamless, or are there some real issues there?
From the very anecdotal, limited exposure that I've had thus far with this small group of guys, I think for most of them, correct me if I'm wrong, but it has changed in the last couple of years where now they're getting Suboxone and whatnot in jail. I think 1 guy had trouble getting out where he didn't have a plan. They did not kind of set up getting him that prescription after he got out, but most of them seem to have had a pretty good transition.
We had hiccups.
Yeah.
We definitely had hiccups where people's Medicaid turned on and they're out.
That's
And so-
the Medicaid.
Yeah.
Medicaid. So that's an issue because
Right.
if they're coming out, and they've been prescribed MAT, then that means they're addicted to it now. So if they don't get their dose on time, they're gonna start to feel weird
They're
and
gonna
they're
fall
gonna
back.
relapse.
They're gonna relapse.
Yep.
And it's expensive if you don't have Medicaid. Very, very, very expensive.
So we've had to, patchwork and pick up people's prescriptions for them and work it out later. We've done that sometimes. Savita will see them without charge and they'll figure it out later, but they still have to get the script from the pharmacy. That's where the.
Well, from a hub, or, they have to get a script from a medical provider.
Just some of the, I don't know if there's time to, the years that we've been doing coaching at Marble Valley, what we've seen, we've been in there since 2016, and there's been a lot of individuals we've served that didn't have opioid use disorder that ended up on MAT. That's an added problem, right?
Yeah.
That's another thing. And then the Subutex that they prescribe in the facility, they want the Subutex when they get out. There's no MAT provider that's going to give them Subutex unless they got a documented allergy to Suboxone. So that barrier alone, where are they going to get, they walk down the street to our center and they've got a script for so many days. Where are they going to get Subutex? Most of the time they try Better Life Partners, which they think is going to give them Subutex. They don't. That's a harm reduction model. It's not one we recommend. We recommend in person, go to an MAT clinic. But they want Subutex. They don't want Suboxone.
Mhm.
So then you go through that issue. And then just making sure they get an appointment with an MAT provider. Bradford Psychiatric Associates is real good if someone's on Suboxone. I can call them and get somebody an appointment pretty quick.
Can you make a switch from Subutex to Suboxone?
You can. It's just they don't want to.
They're used to.
Yeah.
Digger article a while ago, maybe last year, that talked about the percentage of incarcerated people who have an
70%.
identified SUD, right? It's very high.
70%.
Extremely high.
And how many of those people are prescribed Suboxone? Like a big chunk, as Tracy said, a huge chunk. And what did we just say? Alcohol's our dominant problem. Not to say that it isn't polysubstance, that there aren't other things involved. But not every person that's being prescribed Suboxone has an opioid use disorder.
Right.
Which we find concerning,
Mhm.
because now they're addicted to that.
Absolutely.
And that's sometimes it's tougher. I've heard from people that have been weaning off Suboxone that it's sometimes harder than coming off of heroin.
If you just rip the Band-Aid off. That's why the benefit of both of methadone, Suboxone is it's clinically administered, so you can taper. And if you do it properly, you'll have no
Right.
symptoms. But if you're taking 8 milligrams of Suboxone and stop taking it, people will tell you it is the worst withdrawals of any opioid.
Yeah.
But again, it's still better than
And
using whatever crap
is
on the street
difficult.
trying to do it.
People we've had people that get out of jail and they're on maintenance and then they don't want to be on maintenance for a long period of time, right? I want to get off. This is not what I wanted. But the idea is to really work with them about, you want to be sure things are fairly stable in your life at this point when you start to do that taper. Because any kind of stuff that's in flux is going to make it much harder to do that taper. So teaching patience. is huge.
Other questions, comments, thoughts?
I got, yeah. The other fellow talked about, needing something that was higher or whatever. I wondered if you had something similar.
I am an atheist.
Uh.
But if I was
Yeah,
to say
it's-
my,
it's-
I know,
Yeah, yeah.
I, like, we're talking about here, these different modalities.
Yeah,
I was never a big 12-step person. My higher power in that context would just be my loved ones, my family, my friends, and trying to do right by them after a decade of not doing right.
and also I'm talking about your father. This was part of that.
It is what it is, right?
Well,
I know
Look
he
at you
sees
here
me
today.
in some way, right?
That's right.
Blowing through the wind.
Questions, anything? Will, do you have something? Is there anyone? You need us?
I just need one of you.
Who?
Right.
Oh, all right.
Troy, what are you writing now? What number is this, Troy?
Yeah.
what number is it with me and Ben?
Is there anyone else, Tracy?
Nope, that's,
Thank you for what you do.
Just on this nice lady's point, like we learned upstairs in human services over the last few years, that if you're, say, on heroin and so you're coming off and you're on Butte or, whatever, that's a step down, whatever, but there are people, I forget which country it is, that the only thing that they have that they're addicted to is Butte, buprenorphine. And so if you're being introduced to these, Suboxone or whatever, and you weren't on it to begin with, you just created a crisis that didn't exist. So,
And some people want to be abstinent. I was one of those people
yeah,
who went abstinent and did not use MAT.
yeah. But I mean, like the people who aren't even, that aren't even heroin, like it's just saying, like
Yeah.
people that are coming in for
Well,
drug.
it keeps me quiet, doesn't it?
Right. Well, also too, I think a lot of people in jail are requesting it because you're sitting in jail. You're like, what am I doing? So yeah, I got OUD. Yeah.
See, that was the problem when we started the program. Like you said, some got on it, had never been on anything before.
Yeah.
That was not the original intention.
But I'll still
and
say
you also think
the
about the
mitigation
peer,
matters.
the peer influence in the correctional facility. If you have other people that are, talking about, I can get Butte and you're feeling better and that stuff. I mean, if people are struggling and it's an alcohol addiction, they're going to be seeking something that
Right.
is
Oh,
make them feel better.
absolutely.
That's just the reality of it.
Well, I appreciate everyone's testimony. This is very helpful.
Thank you very much. Always appreciate the time.
You're welcome.
Thank you for bringing the sunshine.
Robert on Zoom.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you. So we're on the YouTube, folks, so just hold back. So after the floor, please come back.
Okay.
We got some work to do after the floor as well.
Okay.